Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink, and get ready for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and let's get started. In the first story, neighbor comes into our property, but after that they have bad consequences. In the second story, dude threatened a salesman and ended up getting fired from his own job. In the third story, my neighbors got fed up with their HOA, so they voted themselves into the HOA council and then voted to dissolve the HOA. The first story is, I have a surprise for you, neighbor. When I was a teenager and lived with my parents, we had this one neighbor family that seemed sorta off. One day, the father knocks on our door and tells my parents they haven't had power for a long time and begged to run an extension cord to one of our outside outlets for the day so his young kids could have cold milk with their cereal in the morning. My parents agreed to do this for one day. The neighbor kept up their part and disconnected the cable after that day. A week later, they hook it back up again without us noticing. A month goes by and our electricity bill is basically double what it normally is. Parents head to the backyard and find the cable plugged in, yank it out, and confront the neighbor. At first, the father doesn't show his whole body and cracks the door, but my stepdad gets him to open up the door after pointing out that he is concealing a gun. He didn't have to pull the gun out. Stepdad demands an explanation as to why the cable was run to our outlet, and the dude just sorta mumbles incoherently and shuts the door locking. Bad neighbor family was in a duplex, and their neighbor, sharing the building, comes around and asks what's up. Parents explain the whole story and how the next step was calling the police. Good neighbor is a former police chief and is friends with the entire force. He offers to make the call. Several cop cars arrive. Bad neighbor father and mother are arrested. Turns out, they were running a meth lab inside the house. The mother was a P, and the kids, a boy and a girl between ages 7 to 10, were malnourished. The kids were put into foster care. No other bad neighbor has beat that high score yet. I've seen Breaking Bad, and I know from that this kind of stuff pays a lot of money, right? Now, I've also seen Scarface, and from that, I learned that you never get high on your own supply. Putting two and two together, I think I know what happened here. Now, the moral of the story is, don't do or sell drugs, kids. The second story, entitled Customer Gets Karma Served. So, I figured I'd tell my story on one of the worst, but also hilarious and best karma served customer experience I ever had with an extremely entitled a-hole who thought he was doing no wrong. So, a bit of backstory. I worked for a Canadian retailer which was like the Canadian version of Walmart. One important note for later though is this retailer has an automotive service department. As wild and as crazy as it seems, it did happen. This happened in November 2013, so I was about 21 at the time. I've also suffered a brain injury since then, so some parts are fuzzy because of it, but I'll get it as close as I can remember. It's a long story, but it will be worth it. I ran the hardware section of the store, which included paint products. I get a call on the walkie-talkie I'm wearing to come to customer service. As I go up, I pass who I found out will be our angry customer heading back to paint. He looked like he had a Pacific Islander background. When I reached the front, my friend who ran customer service handed me a can of spray paint and asked me to feel it. I pick it up and immediately can tell it's empty. There was that tiny amount that remained, but it was hardly anything. My friend told me the customer was claiming it was the wrong color. I said it's empty, the customer used the whole thing, and told her I'll inform the customer when he comes back. After a minute, the customer comes back up, and I proceed to tell him there is nothing we can do. He immediately flips, saying it's the wrong color. I tell him the can is empty, he used the whole thing, so we can't do anything. He yells at me, "How can you tell?" I reply with, "I can tell by the weight, sir. There is a tiny amount left on the bottom, but that's normal for a can of empty spray paint. You can't use all of it." He gets irater, saying the can is defective then, that he wanted to use every single drop and that it's only half full. Me and my friend reinstate what we said, that the can was empty and there's nothing we can do. If he wanted to use every drop, he'll have to take the issue to the company who made the can because we weren't going to take an empty can of spray paint back. I was getting rather annoyed at this point too. He then starts yelling at me, "Stop giving me your effing attitude. You're being effing unreasonable. I want to use every single drop. Stop being an effing a-hole and stop being effing unreasonable." He just kept repeating that again and again, slamming his fist into the counter. I had enough of him and said, "If you're just gonna swear, sir, you can get out of the store." Then his tone changed, but not in the way you may think. "Come and meet me outside. I'll be there waiting for you. We can settle this like men. I'm sick of your effing attitude. We'll settle this out there. You're being nothing but an a-hole." My friend then interjects, "Sir, you cannot be threatening my staff." He replied with, "It's a free country. I can do what I want." And then continues on with his threats. I tell my coworker to call the police, and at this point, because of this, a lot of customers were gathering at cash watching the whole thing happening. My friend was on the phone telling them what was going on to the police, and also yelling at the guy that he does not get to come in and threaten staff and that there was no excuse for his behavior. He said he has no problem with her, but that I'm the one who has the issues. I took over the cash register, tried to keep customer going through with their purchase, while this customer continued on with his tirade of threats and poor customer service. Every customer gave me that look that says, "He's such an A, you don't deserve that." Out of the corner of my eye, I see one customer talking to the irate man, and I can hear him say, "Listen, buddy, this worker isn't being unreasonable. I can hear you and only you from the other side of the store. You're the one who's being unreasonable." But he denies it, saying that I was the unreasonable one and an a-hole. This one other nearby customer then seemed to snap. This guy was big, maybe over 6 feet tall, well over 280 pounds. He yelled, "You do not threaten this worker. If you do, I'll take you out there and wipe your A on the concrete myself." This is when the guy finally goes quiet. It keeps getting better. He seems to give up and grabs his belongings to leave, where my friend said, "You can't leave, sir. The police are on their way." He didn't listen and walked out. I took a deep breath. Normally, when I get angry, I shake, so to most people, it would look like the shaking was because I was upset. A second later, 2 cops walk in, and I inform them the customer just walked out. But, as luck would have it, the customer came back in at that second, for what reason I'm not too sure, and I pointed him out to the cops as well as several customers. The cops quickly grabbed him and put cuffs on him, which surprised me. I could hear him say, "What did I do? I didn't do anything." But another customer suddenly yelled out, "How does that feel now, a-hole?" So they take him outside to their cruiser, and I could see them talking to him as he sat in their back seat and him shaking his head angrily in denial. After a few minutes, one of the cops comes back in, and the one says he's denying everything he says, but he wants to make an apology. I tell my friend she can go out if she wanted. I had little patience left to go see him face to face. So she goes out, and when she comes back in, she said he was crying and in tears, saying how sorry he was. But he added, "But I'm not apologizing to him." To which she said the cop told him to shut up. So the cop said they weren't going to press charges and didn't give me the option of pressing any of my own. Canadian law is different, as I recently learned. It's up to the Crown to press charges. I firmly believe everyone should be held accountable for their actions, so I would have pressed them if I was able. They file a no trespass notice for him saying he's not allowed back into the store or he would be arrested, and they let him go. Things get even better, believe me. So later in the week, I had a day off, and the next day I come in, my manager approaches me and tells me the guy came back into the store. He said when he went to confront him, he was at the service bay waiting area and told him, "You're not allowed to be here in the store. We can have you arrested right now." The guy then panics and backs into the waiting room for the service bay. "Please don't. See, I'm not in the store anymore." My manager said, "Yes, you are still in the store. Being in the parking lot counts as being in the store." He then told me the guy then began to panic, saying, "Please don't arrest me. I just want to shop here again. Please, I just want to shop here again." My manager gave him this option, that he fully apologized to me, and that is even if I was comfortable with him shopping there again. So he asked me if I was, and I told him he's just gonna say he's sorry so he can shop here again. He made it very clear he wasn't sorry for what he said. So no, I don't want him here again. He said he'll phone the customer and tell him that he's banned for life. This is where karma comes in. Less than a year later, that one customer who threatened to wipe his A on the concrete came in, and my friend on cash recognized him and thanked him for standing up for me. He said it enraged him because he knew the guy personally. Apparently, his wife works with the irate customer with a child agency of some sort, and that this guy works directly with kids, and there he was threatening a kid, which made him mad. A lot of people sometimes think I look younger than I am. He said because the agency caught wind of the incident, either by police informing them or something like that, and they have zero tolerance for their workers getting arrested, getting into trouble with the law, and stuff like that, he was fired from his job. I did encounter this guy one more time at my next job, but he didn't seem to recognize me. But thinking back on it, maybe he did, because he hasn't shown up to my new job since. Well, it's like that old saying, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And the last story is, they can be defeated. It's now 2007 and I'm home from the military and looking to buy a house. My number one priority is no HOAs. After a couple of months, I find a home in a neighborhood without an HOA. It surprised me because it was a fairly new neighborhood and it was also a relatively small neighborhood. It definitely looked like it would have an HOA, but it didn't. I move in, love the place, and proceed to go about my life. One day, I'm talking to my neighbor about HOAs. I mention how one of the main reasons I bought that house was because it had no HOA. My neighbor, who just so happened to be one of the first people to move to the neighborhood, tells me, "Oh yeah, we had one of those when they first started building this place." I was surprised and asked him what happened to it. Here's the good part finally. He says, well, back when there was still only about 20 or so homes built, there were two people who lived in the neighborhood that ran the HOA. Well, they were just awful people and they were constantly harassing the other neighbors about grass being too high and trash cans being visible and silly S like that. So some of the other neighbors and I looked up the HOA bylaws and realized that we could hold an election to replace the HOA council, and that's what we did. I became president of the HOA and a couple other neighbors were council members. Once we were in charge, we just voted to dissolve the HOA, so now we don't have one. You know, I was once wronged by something like an HOA, but I couldn't do anything about it, so reading about stories where they actually dissolve the HOA, it is great. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and the comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for your support.